The fate of the Witcher, the fate of the monster slayer, an ungodly mutant who gets spit in the back, a beggar ready to risk his life for a handful of coins. No home, no family. The fate of the Witcher is unenviable and very complex, filled with a huge number of deadly dangers. A young man who has become a Witcher turns into a blasphemous creature in the eyes of other ordinary people with whom it would be kind of a sin to share bread. A bloodsucker without conscience and honor, a thug who would take away the last shillong to find a friend, a comrade in arms, or a girl who does not hesitate to get acquainted with a mutant. The Witcher can only dream of it, but his dreams rarely come true unless he is lucky. His fate is to wander forever alone, offering his no longer needed craft, to risk his life and to get killed one day by a random ghoul who decides to enjoy some fresh meat and takes the victim by surprise, and no one would remember him. His place is a hastily buried common grave of hundreds of unidentified corpses. The Witcher can only dream of a family. Most monster slayers can experience female affection only in brothels, where this very affection is sold as a commodity, for money. After the hard mutations that the Witcher's body is subjected to in the Witch's fortress, the monster hunter becomes infertile, even if he suddenly wants to quit the craft. What is in it for him? What's the point? He's no longer an ordinary person. Neither he can be. His long life turns into a race against death. What's the point of it? The Witcher doesn't think about it. He only lives. He knows what he must do, and he just does it as long as he has the strength. And his fate begins very prosaically. Greetings, everyone. The old Witcher is here. We'd like to thank our patrons who support our work. It means a lot to us. Do join their ranks, or instead have a go at a direct subscription here on YouTube. This way you can take part in creating videos, choose topics for them, and soon get early access to them. Anyways, get yourself some snacks, because we are about to start. Usually the fate of a Witcher is born from a dysfunctional family. Most often this is an unwanted child born to a poor father and mother, or even the bastard whom the unfaithful wife worked up on the side. In general, a child that parents do not need. The mother most likely simply did not dare to get rid of it during pregnancy, and now she does not know what to do with this unnecessary extra mouth. Also, such a child may be an orphan whose parents died in the war or from some disease. They usually try to survive by any means. They turn into a homeless child who has only two tasks: to find where to sleep and to find something to steal to eat. Then they become a robber, or together with the same children join a gang that engages in petty robberies, constantly risking falling under the hot hand of a guard or a particularly evil city dweller. This child usually does not know affection, does not know about parental warmth and love, but they have several important advantages over their peers. After all, they are all independent and not naive, deprived of all illusions. Life has taught them how to survive, and if they need to reach into a pocket for a dagger to cut the enemy's throat, they would not hesitate a second. The ideal foundation for mercenary work. Of course, among Witchers, there is also a small percentage of children from good families, those who got into the Witch's fortress rather by accident. Most often, these are children who were taken away from their families by the older, fully trained Witchers by the right of surprise. Monster hunters carried out an order of assignment, saved lives, but when the joyful customer declared that now the Witcher could ask them for anything, his eyes with cat pupils suddenly flashed strangely. The Witcher thought about what to ask. If he had enough money and other needs were not very urgent, then he could appeal to the right of surprise. You would give me what you own, but what you do not yet know. And if it suddenly turned out that the customer did not know about the pregnancy of his wife, then the Witcher would come a few years later and take the child, and not a single person could refuse him this. For the right of surprise is sacred. Nobody can go against destiny, even if someone tries to resist fate. Anyway, sooner or later, the child of destiny would end up in the hands of the Witcher and would become another boy who has embarked on the path of a hired monster slayer, a child picked up in a ditch, a young bandit pulled out of a gang of robbers, an orphan trying to find at least some food, or a child of destiny taken from his parents. At the moment when the boy first stepped outside the threshold of the Witch's fortress, his past was left behind. Now only the path mattered. Severe trials, after which the child has only two ways: to survive and forever devote himself to the profession of monster slayers, or die. There is no third option. Well, the boy has arrived at the fortress. First of all, the older witchers must find out how old he was. If less than 8, then he would go to the same peers. Together, they would undergo a gentle course of training, exercises designed to adapt the young body to the loads that may await it in the future. If the boy was 8 already, either having arrived at the fortress already at that age, or a little older, in any case, most important, difficult and dangerous moment came through for each of them to experience. A dark event, but one that has to happen. Without it, there would be no witchers. Without this craft, the history would have turned out quite differently. The Trial of the Grasses was a real torture. A rookie who had arrived at the witch's fortress, aged between 8 and 10 years old, was tied really firm to a hard table so that he could not move an inch of his body. The figures of renegade sorcerers and elder witchers appeared around him, all those who possessed some knowledge about mutations, those that knew how to conduct a genetic experiment. After that, the drugs and mutagens were introduced into the boy's body, one by one. All nerve endings, all pain receptors of the subject began to scorch with unimaginable fire, and the ultimate combination of incredibly powerful and quite poisonous substances was carried through the veins. Everything was in strict proportions, but that helped rarely. The Trial of the Grasses made the boy's body supple and unprotected. Figuratively speaking, it was being turned into plasticine, from which they sculpted whatever they needed. In this particular case, the superhuman was the needed result. With the help of certain mutagens, which were introduced into the already altered body at different stages of the procedure, this malleable organism began to change. The boy would no longer suffer. He simply fell into a coma, from which it would be possible to awaken only if the experimenters had made a perfect guess with a proportion of toxic substances and elixirs for that particular case. In case even the slightest mistake was made during the procedures, the young candidate for being a witcher would face certain death. Sometimes it was instant. Sometimes a boy came to his senses for a while in order to die in terrible agony. If the first stage of the experiment was successful, the body of the young witcher would be subjected to basic transmutations. More powerful elixirs and mutagens were used. Serious changes were made to the child's bone marrow, the hormonal balance of his body, the functions of the circulatory and other systems, and the work of the brain got altered as well. Visually, this affected the boy's skin, which began to turn unnaturally and eerily pale, and his pupils changed their structure, got stretched out to resemble feline ones. The whole procedure lasted from 7 to 10 days. During all this time, the state and the vitals of the young witcher had to be maintained by a specially trained sorcerer. Any oversight, a moment of inattention or fatigue, whatever, and the boy would be dead. The procedure does not tolerate negligence. Before putting the boy on the table for experiments, he is not told about it, but the older witchers know the sad statistics. He most likely would not survive. Approximately 6-7 young guys out of every 10 would die at one of the stages of the experiment. No more than 4 would survive. Half of the survivors is generally an incredible success, all because of the delicate precision in which mutations must occur, as well as because of the individual characteristics of the boy's organisms, which are not always possible to find out before the autopsy. Finally, the day came. The week of waiting is over and no errors were made during the experiment. The boy opens his eyes and sees a completely different world. Now he's a witcher. Inhaling through his nose, he feels an incredible range of smells, the existence of which he did not even think about. Blinking, he begins to notice those shades and colors he had not suspected about before. His body is much more responsive. The reaction is lightning fast. Instincts are sharpened to the limit and allow not to lose a single detail from attention. Arms with the same set of muscles are much stronger. Legs are much faster. He would no longer be afflicted with the common diseases. He cannot be blinded, poisoned, or brought out of his psychological balance. The pain threshold increased to the maximum. And most importantly, the boy does not feel almost any sharp emotions that he was used to earlier. He's ready. He can now continue the real trials of a real witcher. His every new day now starts and ends with grueling training sessions. His diet now includes berries, herbs, and mushrooms, which are deadly poisonous for all other people. They only help the witchers, strengthening their immunity even more and improving the processes of their body, accelerating metabolism, improving regenerative properties, and increasing the threshold of intoxication. Some of these herbs and mushrooms are a piece of modified product that the sorcerers bred specifically in their labs. This diet is incredibly effective. The boy is growing very quickly, gaining the necessary muscle mass. He is no longer susceptible to the diseases of mere mortals. Any injury is a mere trifle for him, and the most difficult training sessions can last all day. He would not fall exhausted. Whether it was grueling swordsmanship training paired with an experienced witcher for melee weapon skills, or a session on a wildly spinning windmill with a lot of sticks to hone reflexes, or probably a pendulum hanging over a tall abyss for teaching the footwork in a duel with any opponent, or learning magic. Simple, elementary, but as effective and fast as possible. The witch science that would save the life of each of them more than once. Or even an incredibly long obstacle course, which the students nicknamed Torment Mill, the one that develops endurance and attentiveness. It doesn't matter, the young witcher is able to get used to any exercise of any complexity. And even absorbing information about dangerous monsters from books is much easier for him than for any ordinary human child of the same age. After the trial of grasses, his body is open to everything and absorbs absolutely everything that can be useful in the future. It is also interesting that when the young man's body gets stronger after the first experiment, even stronger mutagens begin to be introduced, which now take effect much easier. The experiment to create a superhuman continues. Additional mutations, however, already have a much clearer effect on the appearance of the young witcher. Each of them has striking distinctive features. The legendary White Wolf, the witcher Geralt of Rivia, for example, acquired his famous white mane during additional experiments. His hair simply lost pigmentation, and we can say that he was very lucky because the body could react with much more serious changes. The whole childhood of the boy who survived the trial of the grasses went by in daily training under the supervision of strict and merciless elder witchers. Long, monotonous and exhausting years, after which there is only one, the last but incredibly difficult exam, the Trial of the Medallion, the barrier after which the boy will finally be able to proudly call himself the word Witcher, get the medallion of his cool, brand new and elegantly made swords, steel and silver one. He would also be able to get clothes, a horse, some provisions and money. And finally, he would be able to reach the goal he had been striving for since childhood, to go out onto the highway and start his journey, surrounded by deadly monsters, hateful looks, spitting in the back and curses, in constant search for a place to sleep and a handful of coins so that there is something to eat, heal wounds and rest. A long and almost endless journey. But first, they had to survive the final test. In each witch's fortress, it was slightly different, but the point remained the same. The young man had to earn his medallion. He had to go through an obstacle course, against which the famous Torment Mill would seem nothing more than a child's walk. We mentioned that out of 10 children after the trial of the grasses, an average 3 or 4 survived. Well, that was it. During the trial of the medallion, another 1 or 2 of these 3 or 4 died. So out of a dozen boys selected by the witchers, on average, only 2 reached the end of this incredible training. We don't know much about what the Trial of the Medallion was like in other witches' schools. There was information only about how it happened in the School of the Wolf. It all started in swamps teeming with drowners and foglets near Kaer Morhen, a common thing. Any witcher, even a young one, had to be able to deal with these not very strong opponents, but for many, the path ended here. Still, the monsters took not by power, but by quantity. If they delayed and lingered in this place a little longer than expected, then their hordes might not let go of the young monster slayer. If the young student survived in the swamps, the next stage awaited him, the lair of an ancient cyclops named Old Spear Tip. They had to pass through it, and in the trial, they needed to show one of 2 skills, stealth or speed. Old Spear Tip liked to sleep, but the slightest rustle could wake him up. Therefore, the monster had to be carefully bypassed. If it woke up, then there was only one way out, to run with all their might, hoping for the speed of legs and good luck. Otherwise, death came, for none of the young who decided to try to kill the spear tip were ever seen again.
Ready for the caverns?
Almost. Before we go inside.
Ugh, drink a dose of cat, I know. Any more words of wisdom, like, step softly or you'll wake Old Spear Tip?
Sheesh, you're pricklier than Yen.
Ugh, don't fall in love with me. Let's go.
After the cave of the Cyclops, there was another obstacle, a huge mountain called the Troll's Head, inhabited by the creatures of the same name. Young witchers could choose any path to go through it. They could try to negotiate with stupid monsters, or try to stealthily get past them, or fight them. As in the case of the Cyclops, the latter scenario rarely boded well for the young witcher. Trolls were strong, fast, and virtually invulnerable. They could certainly be outwitted, but the furious monsters were unlikely to be reasoned with by the young witchers.
Witches is to walk no more. Stops? East Mountain, Trolley Mountain, Trial Mountain.
And in the end, those who survived all the ups and downs of the trial reached the Circle of Elements, a sacred place where magical energy pulsed all around. Few of them at this point still believed that the work of the Monster Slayer was surrounded by some kind of romanticism. Finally, they got to the cherished place, and already here, they filled their medallion with energy. Now it was an amulet. Whether the head of a wolf, a cat, or a griffin was on this medallion, it was not important. Only a few thoughts throbbed in their heads. The journey is over. This is the end. I survived. What's next?
Think it's that bad being a witcher?
Guess I could have been someone worse. Just a shame I had no choice.
It was our destiny.
And then the gates of the fortress would open. The clatter of hooves would be heard, and the young witcher, inexperienced but prepared for everything that might await him, would leave for the highway. He still had a lot to learn. Would he deviate from his path? Would he become a hired killer in the service of kings in search of an easy money piece and grow tired of difficult existence? Who knew? Only one thing mattered. Very soon there would be a little less dangerous monsters on the continent. And there, in the fortress behind him, they would continue to subject young boys to cruel experiments. The stern voices of mentors would continue to be heard along with the clanging of the swords of students who have already survived the trial of the grasses. They would continue to create witches there, all the way until there would be too many of them, until they become irrelevant in this world. The witcher looks at the highway and sees his future, but his gaze does not reach far enough. At the end of the road, only death awaits him. After all, as Vesemir said, no witcher has yet died of old age in his bed. Well, that's all for today. Do press like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit the damn bell so you don't miss any of our videos on the Witch universe on the channel. Do you like the videos of this format? And if so, what details of the life of the Witchers would you like to know about in the future? Be sure to write about it in the comments. Feel free to join our Patreon ranks or go for a direct subscription right here on YouTube. We would appreciate it greatly. Thank you all for watching, and see you soon when your Witcher speaks once more.